I am Zazibar, and welcome to another review of an IDW Godzilla comic book. Today, we are here to review Godzilla Rulers of Earth, Volume 4. Joining me on such an occasion, I have Andres Perez, a.k.a. Kaiji Noir.
Hello, people of the internet.
And Dylan McCandless, a.k.a. Super DM64.
What's up?
So we are here to review Godzilla Rulers of Earth, Volume 4, and as always, we are really, really late with this. This came out about maybe 2 months ago, roughly.
Yeah, because I remember I was looking for this book at comic book stores during at the very tail end of the winter break.
Yeah, you see, the reason why I'm not going to remember specifics is because, and in terms of when it came out, is because I placed this on order like during the summer. So I was just like, whenever it comes, and then it just showed up one day, and I was like, oh, cool, Rulers of Earth, and I read it, and so I didn't really retain like when it exactly came out.
Mm-hmm.
So sometime in January is when it was released.
Yeah.
So
that sounds about right.
I do have to complain that like none of the local comic book stores, nor like Barnes and Nobles carried it at all. So I actually had to order it off Amazon. So I was like, is there like such a low support for this comic locally, at least in my area, that it's just non-existent?
That's really bizarre given where IDW is based out of.
I know.
That's really, really weird.
When
you ain't got no hometown support.
Don't worry, we
wonder why we couldn't go any farther than 25 issues.
Just don't worry, we will march up to IDW Studios. We'll ask them, hey, what the fuck?
Hey, why don't we got no comic books? What'd he say? Why don't we got no comic books?
Great!
I gotta read!
Go for it!
Shut the hell up! You're drunk!
Anyways.
And then Bill and Andres were quietly escorted off of the IDW premises.
Hey! We have a right to bitch and moan about shit! So...
It wasn't a delay. It wasn't a shipment error. Something happened here.
You're hiding something out there. Just crates of Godzilla comics being like buried and shit.
My subscription died here.
And I have a right to know.
It's going to send us back to the Bronze Age.
Nobody wants to go back to that age. Did you see what Superman looked like in the Bronze Age? Nobody wants to go back to that. Not that Superman looks any better now, but... I
mean, the Silver Age was bad enough.
I mean, Jesus Christ, he looks like a goddamn frat boy now. Anyway, so we are indeed here to review Godzilla Rulers of Earth Volume 4, written by the creative team, as it always is, of Chris Mallory, who's writing the book, and the art being done by Matt Frank and Jeff Zornow in varying orders throughout the book.
Bobby Curnow is editor.
Right.
And there's, of course, the ink artist and colors, but sadly they never get their time in the sun.
Fine. You know what, Andres? You brought it up. I'm gonna go through the whole goddamn list. Ink assistant by Mustafa Musa.
Awesome name.
Yep. He's gonna become a secret agent.
What was the name? Mufasa?
Mustafa Musa.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you said it better than I did. I was like, Mustafa Musa.
I always thought it was pronounced...
We're going to give him his due.
You see, the thing is, I knew someone in high school...
I always thought that name was pronounced Mustafa, because that's how they pronounced it in
Austin
Powers. That's how they pronounced it in Austin Powers, so naturally I just thought that was accurate.
And I knew someone whose last name was Mustafa in high school.
Mustafa's a badass name. I'm naming somebody Mustafa in one of my comics.
Mustafa, remember who you are.
Who the fuck said that? Colors by Priscilla Tramontano. Letters by Sean Lee. Series edited by Bobby Curnow. And the cover was done by Matt Frank. And cover colors by Josh Perez. Andres, one of your distant cousins, I presume.
Most likely.
Most likely. So this book, what did you guys think overall? What were your expectations going into it? Of course, this one collects issues 13 to 16?
Yes, because each volume has, up to this point, has had 4 issues.
So 13 to 16. This one is a little different than the other 3 that we've reviewed, though, mainly because it's not really continuing the overarching story of what was going on in 1 through 3, mainly because that story ended.
Right. Actually,
the story in this one is pretty self-contained, honestly.
Very much so. Exactly, yeah. And considering how long this last arc with the trilopods, just letting the audience know, none of us have read beyond 16. We're all just waiting. We don't go by issue to issue. We only know by what we see from the covers that have been shown publicly.
Because we mad lazy.
And
we've run out of all the spoilers that Chris Mowry gave us at last year's G-Fest.
Right.
They've already come to pass.
Yeah, this book was contained everything that he told us were. He told us about Mecha King Ghidorah and all that. So, by the way, spoilers if you haven't read this book yet.
Right.
All that stuff before that we kept saying, we can't talk about that. Well, now you all know.
But we still know something, at least behind Godzilla's true motivation.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
very true.
True.
So, we do know that.
I don't know if that'll ever be expressly explained.
Just because of the mandates by Toho.
Right. But anyways, going into this, well, I guess for me personally, I knew that what was going to happen, the basic concepts, and I was really excited for that. I remember seeing the when the individual issues were coming out at the time. I noticed the Godzilla versus a huge army of Showa MechaGodzillas.
That was the thing.
Yeah.
That was the thing that drew my eye. I was like, what's going on with that?
I see. I remember. You remember that you saw that one cover that now, in hindsight, of MechaGodzilla with a bunch of Russians that really had nothing to do with the story.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, and I was like, what is that about?
Yeah.
And I assumed that, because the whole through line of this series, because this does continue the story.
Right.
From volumes 1 through 3. But it just takes place a great deal of time later. I think they say 4 years later, after the events of volume.
Exactly 4 years.
After Jet Jaguar killed Destroya, or destroyed him.
A time skip, that's always a good sign.
Right, and this seems kind of an introductory filler arc, just to keep everyone up to date, the audience, the reader up to date with what's been going on since, and to prepare themselves for the next chapter, which will be the final arc of Rulers of Earth. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, which is cool, because the best part of this is that we just kind of got to sit down and breathe and find out what this world is like now post all that stuff. Because there's a lot different based on how this story started back in Rulers Volume 1 and where it is now. So it was kind of nice to get a trade that's just kind of this is the state of things. This is what's going on with Monster Islands. This is what's going on with Seeker, with the Kaiju people, and with the monsters themselves, where Godzilla's been, how he returns, and all that good stuff. How he survived the end of Rulers Volume 3, and it was good to get a volume that was just kind of that kind of setting up what everything's like now. But the problem is, and really my only true complaint with this volume, because I did heavily enjoy it, was that it didn't get to tell much of its own story.
Right. It kind of, for the most part, feels like one big extended, fanboys, dream fight in a way, sort of, kind of. Well, also, it's kind of one big homage to the Showa MechaGodzilla movies. But,
yeah, there's a lot of that.
Right, but it's kind of too much of a spectacle to where it kind of suffers in the narrative department, to where things aren't explained to a degree that you'd like it to be explained, and it doesn't do the most that it can with the concepts introduced in this volume.
And go ahead, Dylan.
The thing is, obviously, when we reviewed the third volume, we loved it, and right. I always knew that was going to be a tough act to follow. And then when I saw the images that were coming out of all the MechaGodzillas and shit, and I found out that it was going to be basically Days of Future Past with MechaGodzillas, it all sounded really interesting, and I couldn't wait to read it. But once I finally got it and read it, there was a bit of disappointment going on, because they kind of rush things in this volume.
Yeah, I would say that's the biggest problem with it. is the rushing.
Yeah.
The problem that I had when with the first 2 volumes that I mentioned in the last review, that I said that they did much better on in volume 3, and now they're back to fucking doing it. But how they would it would be like, this is a fight that everybody wants to see, and it's over in like 2 pages. You know, it's like, especially when Mecha King Ghidorah shows up, it's like, oh, there he is, and the fight's already over. Okay.
Yeah, and it also doesn't help matters that, like, again, this is like a self-contained story told within 4 issues, whereas the last 3 volumes was all one continuous story arc.
Yeah, it's like
and
they had so many fewer pages this time around because they were doing this story arc in just 1 volume, yet they still tried to throw in everything but the kitchen sink, and as a result, things inevitably come out rushed because they just don't have that many pages.
Right. I mean, for instance, the only good giant monsters involved in this story are Godzilla and Andres.
Yeah, it's very true, and it doesn't feel that way though, just because of like how much. The thing is that just because of how much they throw in. The thing is with this, I think that all the things we're mentioning are good points in regards to what's wrong with this book. The interesting thing is, I don't think they become problems until the 3rd issue in this volume, though. Until issue 12. And part of that is because, wait, did I screw up that? What's in here again? It's 13 to 16, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
13.
It would be.
So
15.
until issue 15, right? My bad. So I don't think it becomes a problem until issue 15 because that's when we find out what the villain plot is. And to be fair, we had a vague sense of what it was at the end of Rulers Volume 3. Volume 3 didn't just conclude the story and then just kind of end it and there's no room for follow-up. They do set things up at the end of that to be continued on in this. And they are, and I think they're continued very well. But as we've been saying, the concepts are good, but they feel like they're rushed out a little bit. And there's a little bit of a joke made of that in this, where the Cryog leader says that he has this line about years of planning being thrown to watch in mere minutes. And I thought that was a cool line. And of course, whenever you're dealing with Godzilla, that always seems to be a trend of an issue of you spend so much time planning out this way of getting rid of him or doing something with him, and then it just falls apart in minutes because of how powerful he is and because of how unpredictable he is. I really enjoyed that about it. But it just felt too like we knew it was going to turn out this way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we knew that he wasn't going to be able to achieve this at all.
And also, it kind of gets a bit tiresome. Like, sure, it is incredibly badass to see Godzilla just go against like wave after wave of MechaGodzillas by himself for a good majority of the fight. But then after a while, they're like, okay, it looks like he's too powerful to where he's just like knocking away these MechaGodzillas and King Ghidorah single-handedly, where it's like it's not really, it kind of loses that excitement.
Well, and the other problem is that it makes the Showa MechaGodzillas come across as way weaker than they should be. They kind of get the shaft in that regard, in that they sort of become cannon fodder. And it's weird because when they first show up, you know, there's the one that kicks Andres' ass, and it's like, oh, this is badass. But then, like, it's like they all, you know what I mean? Then you get to the final, like, the showdown, and it's like they're just getting knocked down one after one. It's like AVP and Godzilla's the Predator. And it's like, that's disappointing because 70s MechaGodzilla is such a badass character.
You're right, and I do agree with that. But I liked why they did that in this, because the whole explanation of why there's now two variants of MechaGodzillas is that these MechaGodzillas are built for mass production. These are meant to be, because the Cryog leader has kind of become an arms dealer, and he's selling off the Showa-era MechaGodzillas to different nations like, you were all heavily influenced or heavily destroyed by the giant monster attacks years ago, and you had no one there to defend you because they were all trying to defend themselves, and nobody was coming to help you. Well, now you can help yourself because now you've got this, and it's MechaGodzilla. And he's able to make so many of them because they're cheaper, which is, there's a couple references to that they're cheaper to produce in this book. And they're kind of, and it's kind of the way they're designed, too. They look like they're kind of put together like on an assembly line. Like, oh, okay, so we put the legs on there, head on top, bam, he's good to go, he's ready for combat.
Right,
and
that's probably like the concept that I love the most, where it's like, it brings up an interesting point where it's like, hey, how come only America and to a certain extent Japan, gets to have all these giant robots. What's the rest of the world supposed to do when they have a giant monster? And
exactly,
and it brings up that point. It's like, hey, remember when Anguirus attacked Mexico back in Kingdom of Monsters? Yeah, we still remember that. Mexico's still suffering.
Exactly, and Kumanga attacked Mexico in the ongoing they did a couple years ago that was just called Godzilla.
Yeah.
So, what I love about this series, I continue to love about this series, and the big part of that is the political stuff. The political stuff is still excellent, and what I love about it is that it's not the cartoony satire that we were getting in heavily in Kingdom of Monsters, and we're still getting a little bit in the single title ongoing a couple years ago. Excuse me. And that is still very much so present here with what Woods is doing now. He's now kind of this ambassador between all of the different kaiju military organizations and the Pentagon, and he's trying to make them realize that, well, you're not funding us anymore, but one day Godzilla's going to return, and this is still going to be an issue, and we're not going to be ready. And guess what? We're not ready because Godzilla obliterates Boston.
And it's also interesting how, like, even America is, like, buying into the mass-produced, cheaper MechaGodzillas, even though they've already got one. And it's kind of interesting where it's like, even though Seeker's kind of, like, for the most part, an American-based organization, they're not technically part of the government. So it's like, it's interesting that the government would want to go with a cheaper option, of course, just to save money.
Which there's some good social commentary there.
Right, definitely so. The biggest issue I've had is that, like, during the Boston attack, where the Cryog leader, he decides to send all these MechaGodzillas that are supposedly meant for each individual country, conveniently, like, whisks them all to Boston to fight MechaGodzilla. It was at that point where it seems to have ignored the idea that all these were meant for different countries, and I wanted to see those countries, utilize those MechaGodzillas, and I want to see those countries' reaction to seeing all their MechaGodzillas suddenly being used by the creator's purpose. I was expecting, like Russia or China and Mexico to all say, "Hey, what the fuck? We paid for those MechaGodzillas to be built."
Exactly.
But we never got to see that. And so that whole aspect of, these were meant for the entire world completely, like, gets thrown away into the background for just to say, hey, look, Godzilla's fighting a bunch of MechaGodzillas.
Yeah, it's a major issue. And let me just say this before we go any further with this issue, because it's kind of the major thing we're talking about. This was kind of, because we did interview Chris Mowry, and we found a lot about the behind-the-scenes stuff, and based on that, we know that this is kind of just based on how the cards sell in terms of the production of this book. So I feel like a lot of this can be blamed on just the uncertainty of whether or not they were going to continue the series.
Mm-hmm.
And that is certainly forgivable. And bearing that in mind, I think this book, it's incredibly impressive and a testament to how good this team is and how enjoyable it is, given that they were, like, kind of given the shitty end of the stick in regards of, we don't know if we're going to continue this, so continue, but we don't know how long we're going to give you to continue.
Right.
So I think it's really cool that this is as good as it is, bearing that in mind, and that's ultimately why it's so rushed. So the only reason why it has that big problem is because of the uncertainty of whether or not the series was going to continue. So I think that we do certainly have to grant them that. It's still a problem. Just because you can blame something on production doesn't mean that it doesn't automatically make the thing perfect. I do still think it's a problem, but it's understandable, and again, it's a testament to how good it is that that was the thing that bogged it down. But I do still think it's an issue because of all the interesting stuff they do introduce. I'm hoping that they'll bring it up in the next volume, though, given we know now the end of the series now, so I'm wondering what they're going to focus on in terms of the political stuff now. But I would like to see the aftershocks of who's going to reimburse us for all these MechaGodzillas we paid for.
Right. And in that case,
is Seeker going to do it? Because they're technically responsible for the monsters. So who's going to reimburse us for all these robots we paid for?
Right.
So I find that really interesting. But again, I agree with you. It kind of got swept under the rug a little bit. But let's kind of take this back to the beginning a little bit and kind of talk about where all the characters are now, and what's going on with the universe. So we're introduced to Lucy right away in a dream sequence, or we don't know it's a dream sequence right away, but we find out it's a dream sequence where she's doing roller derby, which is a really interesting thing to have your character doing because you don't see a lot of roller derby in fiction. It's not something I know a lot about, so I thought it was cool that we got to see like a kind of unique thing that she does, and it seemed to really fit her character. And then we find out that she's having dreams about Godzilla returning. And I liked how subtly...
Interesting.
Well, I was going to say, I liked that this was a subtle nod to the fact that she now has partial telepathic abilities.
Right. So it's like, if this is like more than a dream, but rather a vision per se, possibly hinting at something in the near future or maybe something in the distant past.
Yeah, well, because what happens in an issue later is that Godzilla returns and does level a city. So we know that she's basically like, this is what's going to happen. Though what I liked about the dream sequence is that it was kind of like Gamera 3, where we got to see, like, because it's a nightmare, we're going to play around with the perceptions of a nightmare. So Godzilla is not just Godzilla. What they do is they make him look a little bit more monstrous. They make him look a little bit more kind of like they give him some more points, and they give him the red fire, or the red atomic blast, rather, from Godzilla 2000, which I thought was a nice touch.
So it's kind of like what I like to think. It's kind of like sort of like a, not quite, but almost like burning Millennium Godzilla, because it's like
definitely
plain black and orange.
Exactly.
It's interesting that Andres just said it's like a burning Godzilla, because I think maybe at one point they were thinking of having burning Godzilla be the one in the dream sequence, because if you look at the back of the book in the artist concept section, there are some sketches for some covers, and one of them, it's a picture of the cover, but it looks a little bit different, and the artist, I think it's Matt Frank, writes "Burning Godzilla?"
Ah.
Right. So maybe they were thinking of having...
So I think they may have been thinking of having the dream sequence be with Burning Godzilla, and then at the last minute, that idea. Or perhaps Burning Godzilla was going to play some sort of part in the story, and maybe they had to cut it out for...
Yeah, I mean, it's not in this volume, so I don't know if... I guess they were just like, we don't have enough time to build up the idea of Burning Godzilla, so if it is supposed to be a premonition, I guess that's why they cut it out. But what's interesting is... hang on, let me see if this is in that issue, because there's something I wanted to point out to you guys. I'll save that for later. We can talk about that when we get to references and stuff. But Lucy seems to be in a little bit of a similar position she was in the last couple volumes, where she's now the head of or one of the higher ups at at the Monster Islands facility. She's keeping an eye on the monsters, studying them, and we know she's pulling late shifts, like watching all the monsters and stuff. I love this idea of Monster Islands, and I'm really glad they threw it in there, because I love this concept of just kind of watching over the monsters and studying them. I think it's a really good kind of status quo to put things at, because there's a lot of stuff that could happen, and it's an interesting idea to just kind of have in the background of, we have a series of islands out there with giant monsters on them.
Very much so. I mean, I've always been fascinated by the concept of Monster Island, or like you in this case, Monster Islands. And I'm very happy to see that the main character has progressed to the point where she, as being a kaiju enthusiast in previous volumes, now actually works like hands-on with them, and we get to see what life is, sort of like a peek at like what life has been like for her being on this island. Exactly,
and I've really enjoyed that.
But as well as like forming this like camaraderie with her friends and coworkers.
Yeah, that's good to see as well.
I love this shot on page whatever the fuck it is, where they show you Monster Island and all the monsters are just like in their natural habitat.
Yeah, that was cool. I like that too.
I want to know where the hell Rodan found that fish, because if you think about how big Rodan is, that's a big fucking fish.
I think that's a dolphin.
Is it
that my friend is a dolphin.
That's a reference to Destroy All the Monsters.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, it's still a big fucking dolphin.
Yeah, it is a pretty... It's a bloated dolphin.
Zorno, you clever bastard. Maybe it's a beluga whale.
You know what? It's a pilot whale.
It's a whale?
Which are related to dolphins, but they're not dolphins. That's why it's so big. Pilot whales they're sometimes called false killer whales because of how big they are.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not dolphins. They are very closely related. I think it's a pilot whale. You guys remember that shot, that weird shot there's that weird shot in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster right before you see Godzilla, and you see all these weird lumps in the water. And then when you watch the movie in HD, it's clear that they're supposed to be pilot whales. So that's also what I think this is kind of harkening back to as well.
Oh. What's interesting is that Sanda has blank white GMK Goji eyes.
And is also fighting Kumanga. Or trying to stop Kumanga from fighting Baragon. That's possible as well.
Maybe.
Meanwhile, Gyra's just chilling in the background.
Yeah, Gyra's just like, yep, just chilling out.
It's kind of, he's in the water while Santa's like in the rocky area.
Since I don't want to forget about this point, I'm going to bring it up now. The best thing about this book, I think, bar none, is the individual ideas that they introduce. Not all of them are extremely, well developed, but all of them are good ideas, and they're kind of cool to put in. And they're cool just in terms of the Godzilla mythos. So I'm going to point out a reference to you guys right now that literally have me stop in my tracks and go, those clever motherfuckers. Turn to page, I think it's page...
None of the pages are numbered.
So turn to the page where Lucy is running away from Godzilla.
How many pages? Which issue is it in, first of all? Is it in the first issue?
The first issue. So
is it during the dream sequence or after that?
Okay. I remember this one.
Look at that little shop in the background and what's on the sign. 3 PLE dolphins.
I think it's supposed to mean triple dolphin.
Oh, triple dolphin. And it's that fucking weird water toy from Godzilla vs. Megalon.
Wonderful.
Once again, Zordo, you clever bastard.
I love that. That's my favorite thing ever, officially. My new favorite thing ever. That's brilliant. The other idea that I like, given that this book is so written for Godzilla fans. So Zilla is brought back in this issue, briefly, very very briefly. Just explaining where he is and what he's been doing and why he's not on Monster Islands. And they're talking about Zilla, and they're talking about how, we thought he'd never return. And Chavez goes, oh yeah, we picked him up this morning, and we're trying to get him to go onto the island. But he won't go for some reason. And Chavez mentions the idea of maybe he's not welcome. And they say that, that's probably what's going on. And they're saying that maybe in time he will be welcome. I think this is more about he's not accepted at all into the Godzilla Rogues Gallery. Or into the Godzilla universe.
Or maybe he's keeping his distance because he's pregnant. No,
he's moody. So Zilla, I think this is supposed to be kind of a riff on the Godzilla fan community about how even all these years later, all the stuff that we've done to Zilla to make him just another monster in the universe, he's still not accepted as one of the cool kaiju. So I really like that. I thought that was a really cool reference. And there's a line in here about how they're going to use Godzilla's roar to bring him onto the island. That was clearly a reference to Godzilla the series, because that's how they called Zilla Jr. in that show. They would play the roar of the original Zilla in that show, and that would draw Zilla to them. So I thought that was cool as well.
Also, it's interesting how he's portrayed as like living in the water as opposed to on land, which is kind of like what it was in Godzilla the series, where Zilla Jr. was always hanging out in the Bay Area.
Yeah, he was never on land unless he was fighting. Everything was done in the water, so I like that that's maintained here as well. Is it just me, or his spines look fucking enormous in that shot of him, by the way?
Yeah, they're different than before. They're more jagged, and they have more points, because like the two big spines usually on Zilla is just like one big point, you know what I mean? And now they've got almost kind of like what Godzilla's spines do, where it branches off and it has all these little points coming off the side. They played around with the design a little bit. I like them.
Yeah, I mean, he's supposed to be smaller than Godzilla in this, though, so I think they might be a little bit too big, but they look cool.
Also, it doesn't seem like there's the two obvious shoulder spikes, but then everything else is is significantly smaller than the two large ones.
I like that because that's what it was in both Godzilla the series and in the movie.
Yeah, Zilla's always had that to varying degrees. There's always the big spikes, and then the rest is...
yeah, and then the rest is kind of small by comparison. Which makes more sense given that he's supposed to be a mutated iguana. Not that, I mean, he might not be that in this version, given that we know that he's, ancient, but who knows.
Yeah. I just want to say, on that same page, there's a tripod. Is that a reference to, the Godzilla spaceship?
Oh, yeah. That could be.
I'm thinking that, it's too specific of a shape for it to be anything but a reference to something.
Yeah, that's true. They say it's supposed to be a camera. I wish we could get another miniseries that's just about the operations of Monster Island. Because it's really interesting. I want to know how they keep the monsters there. I want to know how they keep the monsters there.
That's always been my question. How do you contain these monsters on this island?
They're city destroying. A lot of them are radioactive. None of them fit into a natural ecosystem. So what is the military doing to keep them there?
There's clearly no force field. I mean...
Oh, you know what? They actually do make reference to this later in the book. There's another really cool idea that I like right when they introduce MechaGodzilla of the idea of Godzilla scarecrows, where they have MechaGodzilla come out of one of these. And the cry of leader is like, isn't this a stupid idea? Yeah, because monsters are dumb enough to fall for this thing that vaguely looks like Godzilla. And it's almost like representing that his MechaGodzilla is better, and he erupts out of this thing like, fuck these people, I'm better, buy my product. I liked that. That fit his style.
Another great reference in this issue, later on, when Godzilla actually does reappear, I love that they find him inside of an iceberg.
That was great. I'll get back to that in a second, too, because there's something else I really like about that idea-wise. But I love the idea of Godzilla scarecrows, and they say that they use those on Monster Island, so I'm assuming that was an attempt to keep them there, but obviously it failed since they make fun of that in this. That's a really multi-layered reference in that one panel where it's this big fake Godzilla, which MechaGodzilla erupts out of, which is clearly like the original, Godzilla versus MechaGodzilla. That he pops out of there.
It also kind of puts me in mind of that Godzilla-shaped tower from Gigan.
I was just about to... It looks like that, because it doesn't look like the Godzilla in this book, and it also doesn't really look like the Showa Godzilla that the MechaGodzilla is based on. It kind of does, but it looks more like that tower, doesn't it? I mean, it's green, it looks kind of cartoony, so I really like that.
And it looks like he has those inflatable spines.
Yep, exactly.
No, by inflatable, it's like, if you look at the super late 70s suits, it looks like those big fat spines look like they have air inside of them.
Yeah, they look really puffy. So I like that as well.
Yeah.
And
there's a good attempt here to make...
Right before MechaGodzilla erupts out of it, the statue, or the scarecrow or whatever, its eyes glow red, and that kind of reminds me of how in the movie, didn't it have eye beams, the tower?
It did. It's obviously the whole sequence is supposed to be like that scene from the Foundry in MechaGodzilla. But yeah, I like that as well.
Of course, when he's spinning, when he reveals himself, there's a shot of him spinning his hand.
Right, exactly. I really dug that as well.
Was classic. That was classic.
There's a lot of really good stuff in this. But to go back to what you were saying about the iceberg, I really like that scene for a bunch of reasons. One, epic way to introduce the Big G. Classic, have him come out of an iceberg. He wakes up after a long rest. That scene is beautifully drawn. That was Matt Frank, right? Or was that Zornow?
I think it's Frank.
Yeah,
I think it's Zornow. The one Zornow issue. No, the first issue, so far, it seems like for the last two issues at least, the first issue has always been Zornow.
Yep, alright, Zornow draws Godzilla's return. Oh, you know what, I should remember that, because he draws Godzilla's face a little bit differently. And that's the first time we see him. But that shot of the eye
Mm-hmm.
You know what? You can kind of tell it with when you look at the human characters. They don't quite look frank. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're different. All the stuff has kind of like more, a little bit more of a sketchy design. I like them both.
Yeah, it's like if you look at Zorn, he knows there's much more like black. The ink lines are much more blacker, not blacker, much more thicker. Whereas with Matt Frank, his colors, at least the person who's coloring his drawings, his art, the colors are much more vibrant.
Yeah, it's more of like a Saturday morning cartoon, which was intentional, I've heard.
Also,
so I like that.
In the large one page, the page wide panel where he's bursting out of the iceberg, I just noticed that he's using his nuclear pulse, I believe, for the first time in this comic.
No, he used it in volume 1. I think he used it.
Oh, okay.
I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Did he really? What was he fighting?
I guess he was fighting Destroy. Yeah, he was fighting the little Destroyers. And he used the nuclear pulse. He's used it before. But I thought it was an interesting way to get him out of the ice. And also, it's just kind of a nice, like, it's always nice when you introduce Godzilla in something to have big beams of light behind him to make it look more epic. So, I thought that was a good idea as well. It's a nice little hero shot.
Very, very Heisei-esque.
And so, speaking of hero shots, the thing I love about this little scene of these guys up in the Arctic Circle, they're going to club a bunch of baby seals. Obviously, more social commentary going on here.
There for a second, I thought Maguma was going to show up and kill him, but
that's what I thought. I thought Maguma was going to make a cameo, and we know I think they have the rights to him too. But anyway, so what I love about this scene, for a bunch of reasons, they go up to try and kill the seal colony illegally, trying to get their fur. And what I love about this is that it's Godzilla's reintroduction. And they're kind of doing that whole Godzilla characterization of he kind of represents nature's power. So whenever man fucks with nature, that's when Godzilla is introduced. And the moment that Godzilla wakes up is right when man is about to kill something natural. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So right when a guy is about to kill a seal, that's when he wakes up and he's like, "Oh, you ain't fucking with my shit. This is my world, bitch." I really that's like my favorite Godzilla characterization.
And then
so I was glad to see that here as well.
And then Godzilla blew up the iceberg, and the baby seal promptly died.
Yeah, you know what? That's where my theory starts to fall apart. Is that all the seals are probably dead, or heavily irradiated, and one of them turned into Maguma. Maybe that's Maguma's origin.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so, Bill. Some of the Magumas, some of the seals clearly do make it into the water.
Well, we know that the little one got away from the guy, so I think we were supposed to assume that Godzilla didn't kill them. It's like
Godzilla rescued that one seal out of many.
There's no way that baby seal got off that iceberg before he blew it up. There's no way.
I guess. Also, this is again, it'd be so radioactive that they'd probably die anyway. But I like that idea. It's kind of like the collateral damage in Man of Steel. It's like you're supposed to assume that nobody's in those buildings, really. Like he's not, like they're not, it's like there's not like thought put into oh they're gonna die because of that. It's just wouldn't it be cool to show it this way? So I do like that. But yeah, there's a lot to cover in terms of those kind of little ideas that are introduced that are small but they're cool and they're good for our Godzilla mythos. But I really dug that as well. I also love the MechaGodzilla's first fight with Anguirus.
Oh, it's freaking awesome. I mean, and it starts in issue 1 and continues in issue 2, so I guess this would be the time to start segueing. But it's freaking amazing. He starts off shooting out his missiles and shit, and then he goes into his laser beams, and he just pulls out, like, all the classic Showa MechaGodzilla moves during this fight and just kicks Anguirus' ass.
Exactly. Also, it's very fitting that this is the first monster that he fights, given that, the history. And this whole story is packed with references to the first Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla movie. Just to name one, in this issue, I think this is in issue 2. During their fight, MechaGodzilla attempts to break Anguirus' jaw. on page 3. There's this moment where he tries to grab his mouth, and Anguirus gets away, and there's this line where the Cryog leader goes, "MechaGodzilla, finish him." And that's how everybody describes that scene whenever they talk about it, is that it's like a Mortal Kombat scene of, like, finish him. So I thought that was a really cool reference.
Except Anguirus crawls away and does not die.
Yeah, well, he doesn't die in the movie either.
That's what I'm saying, in the movie.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
It's like Mortal Kombat, except it's not mortal.
Right, exactly.
Unlike that Gorosaurus finisher in King Kong Escapes.
Oh, he did.
Also, much like as a reference to MechaGodzilla's first fight with Godzilla in the movie, after the battle with Anguirus, MechaGodzilla starts malfunctioning and is then recalled by the alien, by the Cryog.
Yeah. And the Cryog's control base looks very similar to the Spacemans in what are they called? What do we call them? Oh, the Simians. I'm sorry. To the Simians in Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla. It's kind of this old school science fiction, like all these buttons and knobs and big screens and lights, and I like that a lot. It looks very retro. But yeah, I also love that we finally got to see an evil alien MechaGodzilla again. It's been too long, my friend. It has been too long.
It has been too long. I'm sick and tired of human MechaGodzillas. Sadly, if Legendary ever does do MechaGodzilla, I doubt.
Oh, that's definitely what they're gonna do.
I doubt that they would jump to aliens. Sadly, especially space apes. They won't do space apes.
No, they're not gonna do the Simians. I doubt they'll even do intelligent alien races in their continuity. I don't even know if I want them to. I wouldn't be opposed to alien monsters, as I've said in the past, but I don't think we need to see intelligent alien races. I don't think that's necessary. I think if they can get away with it, they will attempt to avoid space altogether as a matter of principle, but I'm not even opposed to that necessarily. But anyway, that's off track. But I would like to see them do an alien MechaGodzilla in the new Toho movies, if possible, though.
That would be amazing. Yeah,
that would be awesome.
Just keep them damn aliens off my American film.
And bring back Titanosaurus, you bastards.
Listen, if they decide to do like intelligent alien races in Legendary, fine, we're cool with that. I'm just saying, like, they're not gonna do it.
I do have to say, like, they did tease an alien MechaGodzilla at the end of issue 3 of Godzilla Legends, but of course that was a tease at the end, so it doesn't really count.
I so wish that was the beginning of an arc and not a one-shot, because that was such an amazing cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. I'm still pissed.
Do they make what time that's supposed to take place in?
Generally modern time.
Okay, because I was going to say, if it was like a period piece of like the 1970s, like you wouldn't need it to be an arc, because it would just be like a prequel to that.
No,
obviously,
because, there's, if I'm remembering correctly, Andres, there's more than one alien MechaGodzilla in that shot, isn't there? They're like
right. Yeah, there's two. Yeah, it's a reference to two from Mecha G and Terror of Mecha G.
Right. And
right. Exactly.
Titanosaurus in the pit and everything, but Miki Sagusa is in that story.
Oh, is she really? That's cool.
So the idea, obviously, is that all that shit in Heisei still happened in the 90s. And he
right, because there's a flashback to, and you see like a montage of all the monsters that humanity has encountered, and all those monsters just so happen to be Heisei monsters.
So they showed like King Ghidorah, Biollante, MechaGodzilla.
Not MechaGodzilla, not Biollante, but I'm pretty sure I saw like Heisei Mothra, Heisei Ghidorah, Destroy.
Space Godzilla.
I believe it was Space Godzilla. Yeah, it's been a while since I've read it. I just remember. I just remember making that observation when Dylan and I reviewed Legends.
Yes, which is on Space Godzilla channel. You should all go check it out now.
Yeah, you should watch that.
Consider that the prequel to this series of Rulers of Earth reviews.
Yeah, if you want to, basically every single IDW Godzilla comic has been covered by our group, just in varying venues.
You know, Kiyu or Kuryu or however you want to pronounce this fucking name, MechaGodzilla 3, is in this book as well.
Also, which is fucking meta.
And
I do have to say,
seeing him and then turning a few more pages and seeing 70s MechaGodzilla in the same issue is not only strange and a jarring experience, but also confirms that 70s MechaGodzilla is my favorite. I mean, look, just.
Well, there's a shot where a bunch of them are trailing Kiyu, and they shoot Kiyu down, yeah.
And then he disappears for the rest of the book.
Yeah, I thought it was a wasted opportunity. Oh, right. He had to take
Yeah, he had to take Anguirus, but you never see them crash into like the snowy, like into Russia. You don't see them crash into the water. It's just one little panel of one of the Mecha-Gs shooting Kiryu's back, and then one issue, like 1 or 2 issues later, we see Anguirus bursting out into the final battle.
We do see Kiyu one more time later on to confirm that he's still like functional.
Well, yeah, the very last page where you see Chavez using a phone apparently connected to him.
No, we've seen before that when the Spetsnaz people are like, "Oh, you can't do this, and you can't do this, dirty Americans." And they're like, "Are you sure you don't want us to do that?" Because then you see Kiyu.
I just love the final shot of this issue of Godzilla and all the MechaGodzillas landing in front of him, and it's like shit's about to get real. See, these first...
That's the Days of Future Past shot right there.
These first 2 issues are really solid in that the setup in this book, the setup that they do to this story, all of the... everything they do to set up the story is so fucking solid. It's in the next few issues that I have the problems of, it feeling a bit rushed and things. It's kind of like how I always describe the... 2-parters that Russell T. Davies would write in Doctor Who. He was really good at setting it up and getting the stakes really high and making you want to see more, but then the payoff wasn't always that great.
Precisely. I think the payoff in this is fine. It's just, I think it's a little bit predictable, and I think it's again, as we've been saying, it's rushed. But chapter 3 starts off badass. That shot of Godzilla looking all around him like, I am fucked.
Actually,
they bring up
the first shot in issue 3 is actually Kiyu looking like he's trying to make sweet love to Anguirus, but we of course know that he is attaching cables.
And of course, the Kiyu is a straight kaiju, or a straight mecha rather.
Or if he's a robot, doesn't that make him asexual?
Don't fucking ask me questions on
this. Really...
What I say, this is my channel. What I say about kaiju sexuality goes.
I didn't realize that the sexuality of Kiyu had been established. But anyway,
haven't you seen Godzilla against MechaGodzilla?
Yes. And I didn't really have his sexuality either way. Anyway, but that
was the first thing I took away from that movie as a kid.
but the next page. That classic, like, Western thing, Godzilla, you see his eyes, then he looks to his right, our left, but his right, and then he looks to his left, and then he looks forward again, and he squints. It's like that meme on the internet where Batman's like, first I was like this, but then I was like this.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like, it's almost like this, like, shot of, like, are you fucking kidding me? And then he's like, I'm ready. But I love
I was gonna say it's like a Joe Swanson moment where he's like, "Bring it on!"
And then he issues
Patrick Warburton is Godzilla.
And then he issues a mighty Skreonk.
Yep. This fight is cool looking, but I think we talked about this already. It gets a little bit. Not redundant. Boring, but just a little bit redundant later on, because it's like he's tearing these things apart with no issue.
He should be having more trouble than he is the problem. It's my only problem.
Now, I get that these things are not built to kill Godzilla. The Krag leader knows that they can't do it. That's why he has Mecha King Ghidorah, because he knows that they can't kill Godzilla. And I think that this all just comes down to page count and how much time they had. So I think I just think they should have made it less MechaGodzillas. Like, just, I don't know. How many are in this? Like 4?
Yeah.
How many does it fight? Like 4 or 5?
Well, no, there's got to be more, because I see 4 later on in the second half of the issue.
Yeah, maybe they keep arriving, because at the end of issue 2, you clearly see 4 of them landing. And then on the second page of issue 3, he's clearly surrounded by 4, but then he starts destroying some of them, but the number of ones that he's fighting doesn't seem to be going down.
Yeah, it's a little bit, that's part of the problem with the fight, is just that it just kind of starts to blend together. I think that it starts off better than the Anguirus MechaGodzilla fight, and then just becomes more redundant.
I also love the sixth page of this issue. Godzilla falls into a building, and then you just see the 4 MechaGodzillas standing around him, and it's a really, the imagery here is incredibly amazing.
Yeah, I think this is some of the best art in the book. I also love just pointing out references where I see them. MechaGodzilla sticks his fingers in Godzilla's mouth and blows up the missiles.
Yeah.
And there's that shot where you see the smoke coming out of Godzilla's mouth and he falls down.
Yeah.
Reference to terror.
If you look at his eye, he's like, "Oh shit, what did I do?"
He's like, "This fucking hurts."
Speaking of references, I pointed this out.
That's from Terror of MechaGodzilla.
Speaking of references, I pointed this out to Andres earlier. After that page, I was just talking about where Godzilla falls into the building. On the next page, in this book, they brought back, I don't think we've mentioned this yet, they brought back those crazy, psycho, telepathic bitches.
Yeah, they introduced in Kingdom of Monsters.
Yeah. Anyway, they're wearing Exilian sunglasses.
Yes, they are. They look kind of like Miss Namikawa from Astro Monster as well because of the short black hair.
Yeah, same style.
Oh, right.
I love that they're wearing little Russian uniforms. That's cool because, well, for a bunch of reasons, but it's cool because they look badass. They look kind of like Nazis. I don't know if that's intentional, but they look a little bit like Nazis. But more to the point, Dylan, we talked about this on DFOS once. Russia was one of the big countries that was experimenting with the concept of mind control during the Cold War.
Well, also, the scientist, quote-unquote, the Krog leader has disguised himself as the one who supposedly invents these, well, not supposedly, but the one who built the MechaGodzillas. He's posing as a Russian man.
Right, exactly, precisely.
A Russian inventor. His name is Kryogsky.
Yeah, very subtle. He's hiding well.
Also,
he has this weird tendency to return
name, spoken out, or is it just in... I was just going to say, was that name actually used in the book, or is that left in the notes?
I don't think
on the back of the trade.
I don't think
I didn't notice it being spoken.
Yeah, I don't think I noticed it until I got into the back where the notes were. So
it's not a problem. It's just amusing.
Okay.
Which, by the way, the covers in the back of this book are some of my favorites.
Yeah, both Zornow and Matt Frank really outdid themselves this time.
I love there are 3 right in a row. This one where MechaGodzilla is shooting Anguirus, and the next one, this shot of him in Moscow with the Kremlin and everything, and the next page right after that, holy shit, where there's literally an army of Godzillas.
Yeah. Now, do you guys remember?
I never noticed that one. That's fucking cool.
Now, if you remember, do you guys remember on Facebook when it was first revealed that Godzilla was going to be fighting an army of MechaGodzillas? James Biggie made his own little artwork featuring a bunch of MechaGodzilla, Showa MechaGodzilla's hands, all like kind of like almost like fist bumping with the red Russian star.
Yeah, I remember that. That was cool.
Yeah, if only they brought him back just so they can use that.
Yeah, that was really, really cool.
But I love this one of them all flying up into the air and Godzilla.
Yeah, it has this very almost propaganda look to it, and I really like that. Oh, and also continuing to point out
Russian one was
Go ahead, Andres.
I was going to say the one with the MechaGodzilla in Moscow. We forgot to mention that one in particular was made by Paul. Was it Paul Hamley? Paul Canley? I'm not sure. Paul Hamley. Okay, and it's very patriotic looking.
Also, if you draw
Russian patriotism at its finest.
If you draw your attention to the Russians, they're clearly drinking vodka, and that just makes it a fun time.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I'd be down there with them. Like, we got a fucking giant robot! Woo!
Fuck you, Japan!
Fuck you, Japan!
We finally got one!
We cannot allow a giant robot gap.
We've got a giant robot. What do you have? You have nothing. You have nothing.
This is the nicest thing we own.
Damn it! Why did my country finally got a robot while I'm here in Australia?
I don't know. He decided like, oh, I should go back to homeland.
This robot is the nicest thing we own because communism.
This is post-communism.
Their economy's still fucked up.
It is still fucked up, but I'm just saying. Anyway, they're not still living in the squalor of the debris of World War II. That would be weird.
No, they're...
Oh, no, wait, that's Germany. My bad. Excuse me.
No, they're living
Germany.
in the squalor and debris of not having any money for so long because communism doesn't work. But that's a completely different conversation.
Word.
So anyways, that reference that one of you guys was mentioned. You mentioned there was a reference somewhere before I interrupted you guys.
Yeah, when one of the MechaGodzilla's heads gets torn off, we see that he's got the little bulb under it that kind of keeps him fighting that extra head.
Oh, I love that.
It's in the background, and he doesn't shoot the beam, but it's in there, and I thought that was cool.
I always loved that little bulb head. Anyway, it was such a neat idea.
There's also I also thought that although I find it weird that those were built into it automatically.
What do you mean?
Like the reason why they did that in Terror of MechaGodzilla was because that's how Godzilla killed it last time. But in this, it's like they seem to be all designed with that in mind, or at least some of them are. Yeah,
does Godzilla have a history of ripping kaiju's heads off? Because I don't remember.
Yeah, is that his MO? Usually he just blows them to pieces. His MO has never really been up to rip his head off, except when dealing with MechaGodzilla. Also, great use of the force fields.
Yeah.
Using them to kind of close Godzilla in, that was great.
I love this shot of the MechaGodzillas chasing Kiyu.
That was cool. I thought that there was a missed opportunity in terms of Godzilla lifts up one of the MechaGodzillas and looks like he's about to do a Bane on his ass, and I wish he would have done it, because that would have been awesome if he just breaks it in half.
I wanted a proper fight between Kiyu and the Showa MechaGodzillas, and I didn't get it.
Yeah,
I did too.
That's like the biggest thing.
Maybe some of them will still be around and fight later on.
Imagine Andres if Kiyu had turned around in midair, and then him and the two MechaGodzillas had like a Gundam-esque aerial battle.
Yeah, I wish. That would have been cool.
Well, before I forget, I just want to imagine like Godzilla. Sorry, before we move on, I just want to imagine like Godzilla holding up MechaGodzilla is like, I wonder what break first. Your spirit or your space titanium?
Godzilla.
I don't have any spirit. I'm a robot. Shut up.
Godzilla uses the nuclear pulse again to get out of that force field attack that the MechaGodzillas were doing. So all of a sudden, he really has a hard-on for that attack in this book.
He really likes using it. He was just sitting in that ice all those years, just like, I really wish I would have used my nuclear pulse more often. I really like that attack. Because that's how Godzilla talks to himself. He whispers like really monosyllabically, just like, I really wish I would have done my taxes before I died.
He over-evaluates his performances in all of his battles. He's like, I really shouldn't have done that. Obviously, to Megaguirus, that was stupid.
He's a constant inner monologue.
His conscience is telling. His monologue or conscience is telling him like, you can free yourself out now. You got a nuclear pulse. Shut up, conscience. I don't give a fuck about your shit right now.
All right, man. I didn't know you were feeling that way.
I could fly at any time. They know that, right? I could do it.
I did it once in the series, right? He's also aware that he's a fictional character.
It wasn't even the same version of me, but if he could do it, I can do it.
I know it was a completely different design, but that's never been a problem for me in the past. I like to change how I look every so often.
Fucking G-Force pulls out the little 62 model.
I can drop kick one of these MechaGodzillas on my tail.
I bet I could do it. I bet I could fucking do it. You want to see me do it?
If he did that in one of these comics, I would be so happy. And also perplexed.
First year Maori. Last minute rewrites. Godzilla
drop kicks a trilopod.
Yes, I want it now.
With Jet Jaguar holding him.
Yes, exactly.
Bring back Jet Jaguar. There was no Jet Jaguar in this volume, was there?
He's totally disappeared or some shit. Who knows?
Maybe he flew off into space to search for Spock.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that
he's on the planet.
Aww. But anyways, it's clear that they really try to, restrain themselves. And Chris Mowry really restrained himself from using Jet Jaguar because, as we mentioned, like Jet Jaguar, he is like incredibly powerful to the point where maybe he's borderline overpowerful, considering he was able to take out many of Godzilla's most strongest foes. And
Right, exactly.
I like that he was left out of the book, just like treat him as like less of a Deus Ex Machina and just have this all just be like, no, let's see the humans and the kaijus defend themselves for a change.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. We got to see a lot of them do different things. Not enough for my money, but again, just the lesser page count in the restrictions, they weren't able to have everybody do enough.
Yeah, I know. I was complaining earlier about how these fights are too short and they feel a little bit rushed, but some of the imagery here is quite striking. I'm not exactly sure how many pages in it is, but there's these 2 pages of just nothing but fighting, and on one page it's awesome because there's like a DBZ like beam battle going on between the rainbow eye beams and Godzilla's atomic breath, and then on the next page, Godzilla gives one of the MechaGodzillas a fucking bear hug.
Yeah, exactly. And then later on in the book, during the King Ghidorah fight, Godzilla picks up Anguirus and uses him like a fucking mace and just starts beating the shit out of King Ghidorah. It's freaking awesome. But let's get into that, shall we? Because we're really far in, and I want to talk about King Ghidorah. So, King Ghidorah returns in this for the first time since Kingdom of Monsters. Kaiser Ghidorah was in the Godzilla ongoing a year or two ago. But it was unclear.
Nobody has any love for Death Ghidorah.
No, nobody cares about Death Ghidorah, Dylan. Nobody cares! And then, but we also have no idea how exactly Kaiser Ghidorah relates to King Ghidorah. Is he even named in that?
Not even Chris Mowry knows.
Yeah.
No, I don't think he is. Oh.
Did we ask Chris Mowry that?
I don't know.
And he was just kind of like, nah, I don't fucking know.
I think we mentioned. I don't think we asked him. Like,
No,
yeah, what's
look,
going on with that, Mowry? What the fuck's up with that?
No.
Too bad he's not going to be at G-Fest this
He's
year.
like, hey, man, I'm just trying to pick up the pieces of the broken continuity, not his words.
Hey, Mowry, let's fucking talk some shit. What's going on with the 2 Ghidorahs?
It'd be interesting to interview him again after ROE is over and just be like, so, what you going to do now, Mowry?
We make him feel all shitty about himself.
What are you going to do with the rest of your life?
It's like, I didn't have thought that far ahead. Like, oh, maybe you should. Maybe you fucking... This is fucked up. I like Chris Mowry. He's a good dude.
Wonderful human being.
Wonderful man. We're horrible people. That's why we do these things. We're horrible human beings. We like to make fun of people. Even people we like. That's why we make fun of each other.
Even people who might die right afterwards.
Andres and Dylan, you're both pussies. So...
Alright, but I've never cried in the bathroom with a Godzilla comic.
Listen here, motherfucker! That was the Rulers of Earth Volume 3. Beautiful art!
That's not why you were crying.
That is so why I was crying. It was because I've missed you dirty motherfuckers. I was like, thank God they're gone. I can go in my room and jerk off. No.
I'd like to point everybody listening to this video back to the episode where we told that story, in which you went into detail about how you were sad because we had been there for a week and now we were gone.
Shut up, Dylan. I'm not gonna cry this time when you leave. I'm gonna be like, thank God I got rid of that motherfucker.
No,
the feeling
this
will
time
be
I'm
mutual.
gonna be the one to cry.
I know, yeah, exactly.
Andres takes Volume 4 into the bathroom.
Dun, dun, dun,
Oh,
dun.
excuse me, the banyo.
El Baño. Oh man. So this book. So Mecha King Ghidorah. Interesting little bit of stuff to bring him in. So King Ghidorah in this continuity is not a space monster. The original one isn't. He's got a similar origin to what he has in GMK. He comes from some kind of ancient mystical Hudaha, and he arrives to fuck shit up. And he's buried under a crap load of rubble with Godzilla. Godzilla escaped that obviously because he's fucking Godzilla.
Did they mention where exactly did they found him buried? Because supposedly I think he was in New York at the end of Kingdom of Monsters.
Well, we see them digging him up in this. I don't think they state where. I'm gonna look back quick and see if they state where exactly they are.
Yeah, it's in issue 4, second page.
No, they don't specify where they are, which I don't really think is a problem. But when you see that Ghidorah is buried.
Apparently the psychic chicks led him to it. Assumedly with their psychic powers, they showed the alien dude where King Ghidorah was.
Yeah, he didn't even know where he was. There's a time when he goes, he heard of him, but he had never seen him.
And then apparently
he
used Gigan to perform surgery on that motherfucker. That is awesome.
Which is the coolest idea in the book. Where we see Gigan, we just see a line where he goes, "But I knew how to fix that." We just see Ghidorah screaming in pain, and Gigan's just like, "Whatching?" That was badass.
Why didn't he replace all 3 of his heads with robotic heads?
More powerful, I'm assuming. And also more expensive to do that.
Oh yeah, this is the one. This is the guy making the cheap ass 70s Godzilla ripoffs. But I mean, he picked the wrong he picked the wrong country to be in if he wanted to use the money. But anyway,
I think it was a mistake to not show the middle head being more damaged than the other two. Because in this, they all look pretty well preserved. The wings are the things that are fucked up the most.
I mean, it would have been better if Godzilla had just ripped off the middle head in the previous story that this Ghidorah was featured in. But
I mean, they were limited by what exactly happened in that, though. But I do agree. But yeah,
maybe one more panel where maybe like one more panel where we see like an X-ray of that middle head and the alien guy explains how it was too damaged.
Well, I think it could have just shown that and it would have been fine, but it looks exactly the same as the other two heads. I think the reason why they changed it was just for matters of control.
You could make the argument that little sphere thing on the chest could be used for control.
True. Very true. Who knows?
I mean, that's where the pilot was in the movie.
He looks great. He looks just as cool as he did in the movie. But the fight with Godzilla is a little bit too short, and I kind of wish they went on mano a mano.
Yeah. I was complaining about the fight with the MechaGodzillas before, but that is wonderful compared to this one, because Mecha King Ghidorah is such a badass monster. I want more.
Yeah, it feels very cluttered. There's so much shit going on in this fight.
Also, it doesn't help by the fact that all it took was just one blast of one atomic blast, atomic breath to instantly disrupt the connection that the twins Minette and Mallory had over King Ghidorah, Mecha King Ghidorah.
Yeah, it's a little bit disappointing.
I love how Anguirus shows up in the middle of the fight, and he's still damaged, and blood is just pouring out of his nose.
Yeah, well, I also love the shot where he has MechaGodzilla's hand in his mouth, and he's just looking up like, yeah, I got his hand in my mouth, what are you going to do about it? I love that shot, it's so fucking funny. The fight is good, but I think it's disappointing compared to what else is in the book, and disappointing that this is probably the only time we're ever going to see Mecha King. Well, what happens to him at the end of this? Does he just fly away? Yeah, he flies away.
So maybe they'll bring him back for the finale. That'd be great.
Yeah, he does. And apparently does he still have MechaGodzilla hanging on to him? Yeah, it looks like he still has a MechaGodzilla hanging on to him with the cables.
I think the best part of this fight is the moment that you mentioned earlier, Bill, where Godzilla uses Anguirus as a fucking club.
Yeah, I think that's easily the best thing in here.
And especially the look on Anguirus' face. He seems shocked.
Yeah, he seems like, why are you doing this to me, man?
He almost seems like this is kind of.
I'm in a very uncomfortable position now.
He almost is like, this is kind of degrading.
He seems a bit insulted. He's just like,
hey man, I pay my taxes just like every other guy.
Godzilla, I want to live.
He's looking at Ford right now, just all. Can you believe this shit?
Motherfucker's using me like a mace. He had a building on top of him in that movie. Fuck buildings falling on top of you. I'm being used as a mace right now.
I am not an inanimate object. I am a kaiju and I have feelings.
Real kaiju have feelings.
And I have curves.
And curves. But this fight is good. It's just a little bit rushed. And the inclusion of Mecha King Ghidorah feels a little bit too much like an afterthought.
If he flies away, I'm assuming, or at least I'm hoping, that they're going to bring him back before the end of ROE, maybe have him in the finale. Mm-hmm. I would almost wish that they had saved him for that and just had this volume been about the 70s MechaGodzillas, because it's a cool idea to have him in there, but he just doesn't get enough time.
He doesn't get enough to do.
They don't do much with him.
there's just never enough of a moment where it's like, yeah, he could beat Godzilla. I never feel that way, and that's a problem.
On the page where Mecha King Ghidorah flies away.
Before I forget. Sorry, I just want to say, before I forget, we have to say that it's pretty freaking awesome to see Chris Mowry literally introduced King Ghidorah into the book.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
He's like, here he is, motherfuckers.
Here he is. He now exists within the Godzilla canon.
I love how, like, I would love it if this was like a sitcom and like it was live action and we see fucking Chris Mowry come out in the fucking audience like, woo! And he has to wait a minute to let them stop so he can speak. Like, I love when they do that in sitcoms.
It's kind of interesting how it's like. It's also kind of interesting how, like, several times he told us, yeah, I think at G-Fest, that how several characters are based off of his close friends that he knows in real life. I thought it's really interesting that he waited a while before he actually inserted himself into the book before, making inserting other people like Chavez.
Right, exactly. I thought that was nice.
The page on the page where Mecha King Ghidorah flies away, and this could just be a coincidence, but the Cryog leader, and there's another Cryog, who I thought the Cryog leader was the last one, but apparently not, because that's clearly not the same guy. Anyway, they're there with the twins. Is that other Cryog wearing a fucking scouter?
They were wearing that in the last.
It looks like it.
Yeah, he looks like he's wearing a fucking scouter. That's great. I love it.
Is this meant to be a reference? Because if so, I approve.
I think maybe it might be. But speaking of the Cryog, let's talk about villain plots a little bit. So their plot here is a little bit.
Okay, I just want to say on the page where King Ghidorah flies away, there's this part where both Godzilla and Anguirus are marching off into where we presume to the sea. And then Godzilla then seems to turn around and blast a random building. Does that building have any sort of significance? Like, is that where the twins are at? And if so, how does he know that building has any sort of special, any sort of significance?
I think he's just trying to destroy the base.
Maybe it's just a badass moment where, like, kind of like the moment in Pacific Rim where Raleigh turns around and says, "Let's check for a pulse." It's just like Godzilla's walking away, and then he stops. He's like, "Wait, I missed one."
Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. But I also like how the arena in this looks a little bit like some of the arenas from Godzilla Save the Earth.
Yeah, it reminds me of the boxing ring arena, and also, and it also kind of a little bit reminds me of the mothership. Yeah,
it does. Same. I thought that was really cool. So I thought that was really neat. But let's talk about villain plots a little bit. So the Cryog's villain plot in this is good, but again, underdeveloped. So his whole plan is, all right, I'm going to sell everybody in the world a crap load of really dangerous shit in the form of MechaGodzilla.
A MechaGodzilla on every street corner in America.
Exactly.
One in every home.
One in every...
The kids will love him.
They will. So will Russian people with vodka.
He does tricks.
Roll over MechaGodzilla, he fucking blows up. The whole plot in this is I'm going to sell them all a bunch of these dangerous weapons. They're going to kill all of the monsters with them. I'm going to kill Godzilla with Mecha King Ghidorah. And then I'm going to walk away and let them all kill each other. I really like that plan. His plan in this has always been world domination. And in this one, it almost seems to be almost like a big fuck you to Godzilla and the Earth overall. Because he almost seems like, I don't need this, but I'm going to do it just because fuck you. And I really like that. He really hates Godzilla, and I really dig that about it. But I like the villain plot. Again, I think it's kind of rushed towards the end there, but it's simple enough where it works well, where we don't need a whole bunch of issues expositing it. He just wants world domination. And he does what he does to try and achieve it. And it's a creative enough idea where I like that, and his rivalry with Godzilla is good as well. And thus, the rivalry between Godzilla and Ghidorah translates to that, too. So I dug that.
I guess what I like, it pretty much keeps in character from what has already been established in the last several volumes. And also interesting how it kind of plays into how much of a sadistic bastard he is, especially with how he treated King Ghidorah as well as the twins, just using them all he doesn't treat anyone with any sort of like I don't know, with any sort of special. He doesn't give anyone any sort of like real special treatment. He doesn't have any sort of emotional attachment. He just uses kaiju or human or alien alike as his personal tools.
Yeah, he doesn't treat them with any kind of respect. They're just tools to him, exactly. And I really dug that. He's trying to conquer the... He has this line in the book that kind of establishes his character a little bit where he goes, I stole this technology, I didn't create it. And he goes, but it's not really stealing because it's just the spoils of victory. Because whenever you conquer something, you have the right to claim everything in that. That's that very kind of a Greek and Roman type of mentality of once you conquer a culture, their culture is your culture now. That's why the Roman gods are the same as the Greek gods. Because they took that culture over and they're like, yeah, those gods are our gods now. We created those gods, essentially, because we conquered your culture. When Alexander the Great conquered the world, or he conquered a lot of it...
the known world at the time, pretty much.
The known world. He was like, I'm taking all these little bits of these other cultures, and they're mine now. He was a big fan of a bunch of Asian cultures, of Indian ways, of all these different things, and he just indoctrinated them into his own culture. And there's a little bit of that going on with MechaGodzilla and with some of the technology and with the telekinetic girls. He sees it all as his stuff now because he's conquering the world. He's the conqueror. And I thought that was kind of cool. So I really like him as a villain, and I hope that they continue to use him in the future.
I like how he escaped destruction at the end of Volume 3, and he's been hiding out among humans ever since. And since then, he's been plotting this thing. It reminds me so much of the vibe that you get in Terror of MechaGodzilla, where MechaGodzilla and the girls in this one kind of play a similar role to Katsura in that way.
They do, yeah.
Is that they're using MechaGodzilla and then this other kaiju, which in this case is King Ghidorah, and in that case was Titanosaurus, just as the instruments of his revenge. It's kind of a thematic similarity.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was good. But I do really, I think the villain plot works in this. It's simple enough. It's in character. I think it works good. But guys, we're about an hour and a half in, so I think we ought to start wrapping things up a little bit. Is there anything really specific that you guys think we need to get into in depth with this?
I do. I just want to briefly go over Stephen Woods and the reintroduction of Allie, from who we haven't seen since Kingdom of Monsters.
We haven't, and I really liked where they were in this too. We got to see Woods as kind of an old man now. He's got that strip of gray in his hair. He's injured from his battle with the Destroyer at the end of Volume 3. I also love how he plays into the politics. He's trying to fight for the continued funding of these anti-kaiju operations. And it was just kind of nice to see him in this kind of this worn-down hero role. I thought that was good. He continues to have a personality that he lacked in Kingdom of Monsters, so that was nice as well.
Mm-hmm. And the character of Allie, she seems to be, still a very likable character for the most part. You really get a sense that these two characters really do love each other, and that in a familial, if that's a real word, that so like a family. They've been there for each other. They've experienced so much together for now. It's been in 10 years in this continuity, and how they're both maturing and entering. The kaijus have had a strong impact on their lives, and it only helped them become stronger.
Exactly. That's kind of the place where Woods comes to at the end of this book. Is that I wouldn't say he goes through a real strong through-line character arc, but he starts to have realizations about his life and about Godzilla. Of no matter how many times you try and run away, trouble's always going to find you, so you better stand up to it, otherwise it's going to destroy you. And that's what almost happens in this when Godzilla attacks Boston. So he decides to get back into the game despite his injuries. Kind of a similar thing with Godzilla. Godzilla's been frozen for 4 years. So I kind of like how they continue to parallel the two of them because they're kind of both our protagonists. So I thought that was cool. I thought it was good at the end where they go, I'll give the big guy this. We're both really good at dealing with trouble once it comes to us, so I thought that was nice. So I think that there's a lot to like about it. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up specifically, though? Dylan, do you have anything to say about Woods or anything else in particular about this that we didn't get into?
Not really. Mainly because, unlike the two of you, I didn't read the series previous to ROE. So.
Oh, okay. So you don't have that background with Woods.
Yeah, I don't have the connection to Woods. I knew of.
Aside from hearing me call him generic in that review I did.
I know of him, and so I wasn't confused while reading it or anything, but I just don't really have the connection to him, and therefore don't really have much to say. Same goes.
Absolutely.
Same goes for the crazy the psychic girls.
Yeah, they're not a huge part of this, which I thought was fine because I wasn't crazy about them in Kingdom of Monsters anyway. So I thought they did what they had to do.
Thank God they don't talk. I mean, they do talk, but they don't talk as annoyingly as much as they did in Kingdom of Monsters.
Yeah, I love how the Cryog leader makes fun of them too, where he's like, it was a bad joke. I'm just fucking with you ladies. I thought that was great.
Well, it was interesting that he still made a reference referring to them as princesses, which, like, in Kingdom of Monsters, they wanted to be like princesses or queens of France or the world or whatever.
Yeah, and they were using Basher to try and do that. But overall, so let's go into kind of overview stuff and wrap up on this review. I think overall this book works. I think it's entertaining. I think it does a lot of the same things that we've been loving from this series in the past. The art continues to be fantastic. Where I think this book really kind of falters where the others didn't is in... Well, you know, I'm not even going to say that because the other volumes have had these problems as well. But I felt that they were a little bit more noticeable in this because this was kind of more of a self-contained story of things were pushed along kind of quickly in regards to both the story and the action.
That and the last volume did such a better job at this that, you know, they finally sort of managed to not do this, and then they went back to doing it this time. So it was just a tad more noticeable to me for that reason.
I agree, absolutely.
I think if you had, well, as you mentioned before, like this is you could have done much more with this story. You can told it in more than one volume. I mean, like if you had a story like say like the Godzilla Jaguar Las Vegas fight, maybe that's something you can have like a self-contained story around it because it's like a very small-scaled event. With something like this, it's like, again, yeah, there's a lot of details you can dive into to make for a really good story into an amazing, like, excellent story.
Yes, this one's good, but not great. I think that's overall how I feel about the whole volume. It's good, but not amazing. The last volume was amazing. This one was good in comparison, though. Good self-contained story. The first two issues are excellent. The last two are problematic for me, especially with those last two fights. I think they just both ended on really disappointing notes and just kind of became a little bit predictable. Considering how much like fans wanted to see them, you know, a bunch of MechaGodzillas, Anguirus and Godzilla fighting Mecha King Ghidorah. There's a lot of potential there for really badass fights that I think they kind of missed out on. But you guys have any closing thoughts specifically?
I pretty much agree with what you just said. It's just that I feel like the first two issues were really solid. In this volume, they did a great job of setting up the story, but then the payoff was not necessarily bad, but just a little rushed, and could have used some more time, you know, which, I mean, they're limited in the medium, but it's still a problem. So. Absolutely.
Andres?
Let's see. Overall, Godzilla Rulers of Earth Volume 4 is definitely something that I would recommend to adjust as much as I would the the previous three volumes. Not as good. It doesn't really. It feels like it's over before you know it because it just builds up, and the payoff is not as great as as you hoped it would be. But still, there's still so much from like a story perspective, from characters, from the artwork, to the spectacle. Everything else still shines. You know, the talent is still there. I can only assume that like the circumstances and the politics of the comic industry, in this case, perhaps may have just conflicted with the writing.
I absolutely agree with that, 100%. I think that's really what's to blame here, what really caused all the problems. But again, I think it just goes to show how talented these guys are that they were able to still push through and give us something that was this good, despite all those problems. Again, it's still problematic, but it still was really entertaining. Listen, if you're reading this series, it's almost everything that you like about the series is still here, still strong. It's still wildly entertaining, so, don't ignore it just because it's a self-contained story and just because it isn't as good as the last volume, it's still great, so definitely give it a read. If you're a Godzilla fan again, and you haven't read this series at all, go back to Volume 1 and read it from the beginning, because it is the best Godzilla ongoing series, I think, in Godzilla history. Just the most respectful to the franchise, the most comprehensive, the most fun, the most jam-packed with ideas. I still think the best Godzilla comic still has to go to Half Century War, but this is definitely the best ongoing Godzilla series overall. So, shining reviews from us all, except for the problems that we mentioned. So, guys, I think that's going to do it for our review of Godzilla Rulers of Earth Volume 4. Thank you very much for listening as always, and of course you can continue to listen to us ramble about more bullshit on the Sons of Sarazawa podcast, put out every other week. You can follow all those shenanigans by subscribing to my channel and also by following the SOS Network homepage on Facebook, which you can like in the description below. You can also listen to the Demons from Outer Space podcast every week, also on my channel, and also listen to Shoewatch Super Dynamic Ultra Force Go on Andres' channel. You can subscribe to him to get that, but you can follow all this stuff on the SOS Network homepage for the most direct link to all that, so go ahead and like that in the description below to get all of that when we put it out. So more stuff to come from us in the future, but until next time, I'm Bill Worster, a.k.a. Zazabar.
Oh, okay.
Talk.
I am Andres Perez, a.k.a. Kaiju Noir.
Super DM64.
And until next time, kids, sayonara.